Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Turn Up. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are beyond excited. I think we are going to talk about some pretty good topics. We're going to kind of move away from the mainstream of what the news cycle is dominating, kind of talk about some fun, controversial topics. So, BG, you ready to get going?
MRCK, thanks again for having me. Like you said, not as crazy a week in the mainstream, but ready to get kicking.
I love it. I love it. And CK, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Happy Independence Day, everyone. 249 years of freedom. I don't know, would the founding fathers be happy with our current state or would they be rolling in their graves?
You know what? That is definitely a fair question. And as always, turn ups, please check out our Patreon. Every dime you give us supports the channel, supports everything we're trying to do. And like, share, subscribe, and we appreciate it. All right, guys. So I've been thinking about for a while. I received some memes over the weekend earlier this week, and it's a sad thing when a meme really makes you think about like, is this normal? Is this right? And I kind of just went down rabbit holes in my own mind. And I think this is a great opportunity to talk about, is the Democratic Party imploding due to its contradictions, its overall hypocrisy? I know before Trump was elected president back in November, every major news station was saying, hey, if Trump doesn't win, the Republicans have lost what would have been 16 out of the last 20 years. The party is done for. They're going to have to rebrand. They might splinter off into the Tea Party or whatever. Well, even though Biden and Obama dominated the last 20 years or 12 years over the last 20, I think the Democrats are more trouble than ever before. And one of the reasons why is I think it's that really radical, super liberal, super left that's pushing a lot of moderates away. And I'm talking about like almost to the point where it doesn't make sense. So you'll see like a lot of liberal women, you'll see people from the LGBTQ community actively supporting Hamas, actively supporting Palestine and Iran, even though that homosexuality is a criminal offense punishable by death. So just trying to follow the logic train there makes no sense. And women would face significantly more systematic oppression, whether it's limited to education, a strict dress code, and just overall brutal punishments. And it just doesn't make sense to me when I'm looking at it. And like I said, I got a meme about this and I was like, oh shit. It's scary when a meme has some validity to it. And then I went down even further down the rabbit hole. And I started looking like, well, if the far left is supporting terrorist organizations essentially, and I know what they're really doing is they're trying to support the people that are innocent people being killed. But when you do wave the flags, when you do talk the way you do, it does kind of get rolled up into one. It always made me wonder why they didn't really support the wars in the Middle East. Even if you're against killing, even if you're against the taxpayer dollars like CK is, the United States did a lot of good for Afghan women and taking back from Taliban rule, allowing girls to go to school, allowing women to work, allowing them to go out in public without their husbands or their father. And now that the Taliban has returned to power, it basically erased 2 decades of women's rights. And women have lost, like I just said, lost 2 decades of rights and everything they were fighting for. And then you kind of just go down these rabbit holes and you're talking about identity politics. You're talking about a selective outrage on human rights. It's like, oh, we're oppressed in America, but let's not look anywhere else, whether it's the weaker Muslims in China or what have you. And the more and deeper I go into it, CK, I just think like this party is just so confined to a certain thought that it's afraid or it won't allow any other thought to enter. And I almost feel like the Democratic Party is caving in on itself. Are you with me on this one, or am I out in left field?
MR, I agree with you to a point. The hypocrisy of the people tweeting about, the victims and people getting persecuted and blah 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 because they were misgendered, from their iPhone that was, the precious metals to make that iPhone were mined, with child labor
Yep.
halfway across the world. The hypocrisy is laughable and it is obvious. My only, if I were to play devil's advocate, because
Play it,
that
dude.
seems
Play it.
seems to be my role the last couple podcasts.
We're here for it.
If I were to play devil's advocate, I would say that the only thing the Dems have going for them is the hypocrisy of the right isn't far behind. So, every election seems to be this lesser. I'll pick lesser of two evils, and sometimes that's the Dems, sometimes that's the Republicans. But like, all of them are lying, and all of them are making believe. I think we talked about this earlier. Uh, off the podcast, how many Republican congressmen have tweeted in the last 2 years, our national debt is the greatest crisis we face. Mike Johnson. In 22 years, our national debt went from 5 trillion to 32 trillion. What is happening to the next generation is irresponsible. Ted Cruz, uh,
Yep,
Charlie,
that's all
Charlie,
super fair.
and then all of them just passed the one big beautiful bill. Proud to say I support this bill. So these guys are all full of shit, and they all speak from one side and do the other.
But
So
let me interrupt you there. I'm not saying anyone on this podcast is anything but moderate, but I think if you were to circle around the conservative side, they are not all on board. I think there is an incredible amount of pissed off conservatives, whether they're MAGA conservatives, whether they're more center or even further right. I don't think there's a lot of people happy about this. And I think that's one of the big differences between the two parties right now. Now, disclaimer, I believe in a multi-party system. I don't think there should be two parties. I think it's terrible and you should take more of like a European approach to multiple parties. But point being is that I don't see the right populace that votes, not, the Congress people getting in line, supporting this outright. I think there's a lot of people that are genuinely upset.
yeah, but that's also for better and for worse, MR, because you talk about, hey, is the Dem party done for? Well, the one thing that Dems do is they get in line.
Ooh, that's a really good point.
A lot of people on the right call them sheep and yada yada yada. But when it comes to vote for the Democratic candidate, they will flip sides and they'll vote for it because there's a Democrat. And the Republicans, they can fight and all they want, and the Libertarian sect will fight about this, and the War Hawk sect will fight about that, and they'll all argue about it. And then when it comes to time to vote, sometimes you only get a poor turnout.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a really, really fair point. And again, here comes the irony. The liberals will claim that they're more open minded, that they're uh, more in tune with what's going on. But if you get in lockstep, like you just said, that like shows a very close minded approach, right? Where if you're saying the conservatives are too disorganized at times because they're going to vote for what they believe in, and that may mean not getting all the votes for the one person actually beat the Democrats. Well, I actually think that shows more open mindedness, less conforming, fighting for what you believe in, and holding other people accountable. So I do find it really interesting. There's a few more things I want to hit, though, that I like to discuss just a little before we move on to your big talking point. And that's two things. One, when focusing on the decline of the Democratic Party, one big thing I see a lot, and I cannot wrap my mind around it, and we were just talking about New York last episode, is that these Democratic-run cities are some of the worst cities, the worst policies that you can possibly imagine. You look at San Fran, Chicago, New York, struggling with homelessness. We were talking about that earlier in the week, just texting between the three of us about the homeless issue. Talk about crime, poor education, and the solution to the crime is to defund the police. Well, that's just going to make it more unsafe. We saw that in the 80s. And the liberals are blaming systematic racism while ignoring the real consequences of their policies. And it's like, oh, none. It's almost this, hey, we won't accept responsibility. We're gonna blame it on 200 years of systematic racism, and we won't blame it on people that just entered the country through our policies, that don't understand the culture, don't understand how things work, may not have the best intentions, and go down the list that you want. Um, and then one more thing, CK, before I ask for your opinion on it, and then just the overall bullshit of tolerance, claiming that, hey, we have to accept everybody, whether it's pronouns, whether it's gender, where it's whatever. And honestly, most people I talk to, they don't really give a shit. Hey, if you want to be called this, that, or the other thing, people will do it because they're not trying to start an issue. They're not trying to start a fight. They're not just trying to disrespect people out in public. But if you don't fall in line with that level of thinking, you get canceled yourself. You get harassed. You get your social media blown up. You get
They
doxxed.
eat their own. Yep.
Exactly. And so I think there's definitely a pushback because of that under Trump's administration, where people feel like they have a leg to stand up on. But those two things are just really, really hard to get over. And I don't know, man. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll say two things. You talked about Democratic cities getting run into the ground. I mean, to your point, what's the cleanest, safest New York has ever been under Rudy Giuliani, right?
Yep. Yep.
And you can like Rudy Giuliani or hate him, but and you can like stop and frisk or hate stop and frisk and the broken glass policy and all of those things. I mean, I turned to Singapore, and I mean, you get thrown in jail and beaten for spitting out your gum on the sidewalk. That's the trade off. You want a clean city, you want a safe city. You're tough on crime, and you're adopting a lot of these conservative policies. Might not be good for liberty, though.
The trade-off, right? The trade-off to everything. And BG,
Always
you've been quiet because I haven't called on your name yet. You got any thoughts here? Are CK and I
Yeah.
out in like total left field? Are we
No,
missing the boat?
no, MR, and I kind of wanted to make sure I said something because I think most people think that I'm probably pretty conservative based on the views that I've shared in a couple of the other podcasts, but I would say I'm definitely more of a moderate, kind of trying to sway both directions. I think the extreme far right MAGA Republicans are not people I identify with, and I don't think the far left woke craziness of the DNC is something I identify with either, and I'm definitely in between. But to your point, specifically, one of the things I was looking at and I had mentioned to you that we hadn't talked about was actually California repealing their environmental law. Finally,
Okay.
50 years later, right? Democrats are now realizing 50 years later they have a huge homelessness problem. They have a huge problem in San Francisco and Los Angeles with people all over the streets, and they have no means with which to create a sufficient supply of housing. And here we are.
Yeah, well, didn't they spend like billions of dollars on the homeless problem? Like $20 billion, some stupid number, and they actually increased the homelessness. And then CK, we were talking
Yes.
earlier in the week, and you brought up the fact that when the Chinese representatives came to San Fran, Gavin Newsom cleaned it all up, and as soon as
in a
they
weekend.
left in a weekend,
Homelessness
and
was solved in a weekend.
was it solved, or did they just put them in a corner and be like, "Shut the heck up," and I'll let you back out in public in like 3 days?
I would say solved. No. I mean, that's a good point, but like it was addressed, right? It wasn't addressed. And BG, you say like, oh, they're finally realizing. I don't think it has anything to do with realizing. I don't think these guys are dumb. AOC's kind of dumb, but I don't think Newsom's dumb. I think that there's money to be made in a high-speed rail that gets funded every year, and there's money and power to be made in a problem that can never be solved. You can keep pouring money into those, and you can keep pouring money into these nonprofits, and those nonprofits can go and turn around and pour 20% of those back into your campaign, and yada yada yada. I don't think these guys are dumb. I think they're just corrupt. That's why these problems aren't getting solved.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think both sides are corrupt. And so before
Yeah,
we
of course.
yeah, no, true. Before CK, we turn over to you for the topic that you want to cover this week. It does seem to finish out my bashing of the Democratic Party is that I do think it's completely broken. I think they choose all non-policy issues to run off of, and you end up with candidates like Kamala Harris, who I've gone on record many times, and every opportunity I can, I will go on
She's
record and
dumb.
say she's the worst political candidate the Democrats have put up in the last 50 years, hands out. I think it's like not even close.
Until
Now,
they put up Tim Walz in 2028.
oh my gosh, that would no, they're gonna put Gavin Newsom, and now she's running for governor or about to run for governor of California, and it's like, how dumb can you be? And so, to put it this way, if you're a liberal and you're still listening, which I kind of be surprised at this point because we just bashed
Don't
for the
worry, I'll
last 10
flip
minutes.
it. I'm going to the other direction.
Yeah.
I
CK's
can't
about to
wait for
go.
CK to take on the GOP.
Yeah, exactly. I do believe that if a country is going to be successful, you need multiple parties. I think some parties are going to have great years or maybe great decades where they get all the policies right, and you're going to have some that get them all wrong. But you need that balance at the end of the day, or you will go too far left or you'll go too far right. And if the Democratic Party implodes, which I think it very easily can, especially if it loses in 2028, you're going to see, the conservatives potentially run away for multiple elections, which maybe if you're a conservative listening, you're like, thank God this is amazing. But usually, the majority of the time, it is a bad thing when there's no check on power.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so I'll stop there. CK, all right, I guess you're going to go bash the GOP. What do you got for us today?
125 days ago on the dot, Pam Bondi brought in a bunch of conservative influencers, and they took a bunch of photo ops with files that said Epstein files released, yada yada, and everyone cheered, everyone clapped, everyone said, "Wow, finally this, the GOP under Trump is releasing the Epstein files." It was a giant nothing burger. All of
Yes, it
it
was.
was already released. Every single time Pam Bondi's been pressed since, she's like, "Oh, we're reviewing the videos. Oh, it's not my fault. Oh, they're hiding. Oh, what has she done about it? Absolutely nothing." And you know what? The best thing they've done about it, and the media and everyone on Lock and Step, has just shut up about it. Every single time it's gone up, she said something, and then everyone is diverted to something else. So it screams a conspiracy. Why are we covering this up? Is A, Donald Trump involved? B, the CIA involved, or FBI or intelligence agencies? Or C, a foreign entity, one of our allies and partners, or all of the above, or two of the three? Who is causing this to get buried? Why are we burying this late? We had a good conversation. I mean, bring up your point, Mr.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things here. One, we were talking about going over topics before the episode, and CK brought this up, and I'm like, I don't think anyone cares. Like, so I read books about Jeffrey Epstein, about the lawyer that went after him, that was getting all of the people that he sexually exploited. I read this dude's book, and I was like, oh, Jeffrey Epstein, one of the worst human beings in the world. Yes, he didn't commit mass murder, but wow, is he a horrific human being? And so I'm like, I don't think people care right now. And maybe that's terrifying that this horrific human being didn't kill himself in prison. And there's a lot of very powerful people that are still in power. So, CK, I think this topic is a nothing burger because I don't think it's going to be picked back up. And yeah, Trump is probably involved to some degree. If you want to say he was on the island and did horrible things, maybe that's a stretch too far. There's no proof about that. But this is the issue, or this is the interesting part. At the end of the day, this did get out to the public, and Epstein was arrested, put on trial, and killed himself, right? So there was some point where people stopped covering it up enough to exploit him and kill him, right? But also to the same extent, there's still enough powerful people that are like, no way, my entire legacy, reputation, I'm not going to jail over this guy. So I do think it's like, yeah, there's good trying to bring him to justice, and there's bad holding in the whole story.
But the only reason he was brought to justice is so they could silence him, so that he could never, he would die with his secrets. Because MR, him and Ghislaine Maxwell, right? How do you get sentenced for sex trafficking, and there's no one on the other end, the receiving end? Who was he trafficking to? We're not touching that?
Yeah, that's a great. I know, right? Yeah, so we know we have a lot of witness statements. We have a lot of women that testify that they were on the island, that they went to his house to give massages and do all those. And obviously, the massages escalated to sexual things. And so we have all of these people. I'm sure. I think actually some of them have mysteriously died as well. But
Plenty of mysterious side. One more thing to this point.
Yeah, go for it.
The argument is it's a nothing burger. People have moved on. But like the question is why? First of all, I think people have moved on because people are fed information. They don't go find information, and the media has moved on. Why is the media bearing this? Why are the politicians in charge bearing this? It's because they're complicit. And the last thing I'll say on this point is 249 years ago, we went to war over a tyrannical government, and we define tyranny as a tax on tea, amongst other things, but taxation without representation.
Yes.
Now we have a tyrannical government that everyone, both sides of the aisle, will readily admit is complicit in one of the most evil, heinous, vile acts of all time. Like not only probably doing it, like these politicians are doing it, the intelligence, like they were probably funding it, they were a part of it, they were an integral part of it, and no one is doing anything about it. Like, if this doesn't get people up in arms, then we're just gonna die of complacency as this whole country burns down.
Well, CK, pick your poison.
There's
right?
nothing worse.
Sure. And I'm not playing devil's advocate. I'm just looking at it from a different lens, right? So you're making the point, like, people are fed information. Absolutely. People have jobs. They have families. Usually news is like the fourth thing on their list after their hobbies, whatever they do, right? So they're getting fed information. They don't have the time to research, to look it up, unless you're like pretty much in an academic setting. If you just look back a few weeks ago, everything was LA riots. All of a sudden, Iran kicked off, LA riots went away. They passed a bill where they're going to start tracking all these people that are funding the riots, and all of a sudden there's no more LA riots. And all that happened in the background, and there was no news coverage of it. Yeah, the news is the fourth branch of the government, man. It is beyond corrupt. And so they feed you these stories. And that's not even the worst thing. You want to talk about bad things? Point to these oil spills that happen in our country. Talk about Flint, Michigan, and the water and the lead in the pipes. You point to it. All these bad things that happen get buried, and I'll get buried for one reason or another. Whether it's money related, whether it's someone trying to get reelected in office, whatever you want. This is just another one. And all those women that were horrifically abused, and all those disgusting humans that took advantage of these children, they'll meet their consequences in hell. Because unfortunately, the way the system's designed, if they weren't brought to justice now or by now, I highly doubt it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's sickening that this is the party that ran on it. Kash Patel, he went on every podcast under the sun, said day one, day one, day one. Pam Bondi said day one. These people ran on it, and people who are sick of the everyday politician was like, Trump is refreshing. Maybe finally we'll get something.
If anyone was going to do it, it would have been him. But even he's not powerful enough. Whether he lied to everyone as a campaign promise he was never intended to fulfill, or enough powerful people stopped him. And if you can stop Trump, who is a person that clearly does not give an F, as you can tell from his Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, or Truth, whatever, then that power is terrifying. BG, you haven't said anything yet. You got any thoughts here?
No, I'm on board with CK's logic on this one. Well, because to that exact point,
CK threw up the thumb sign, and I laughed.
No. To that exact point, DJT was supposed to be the awakening and one of the first presidents that had immediate access to the public through Twitter, right? Everything that normally wouldn't ever be talked about with people in high places of power was coming out immediately, right?
Yeah.
And so the whole world thought, oh man, this is going to be a reckoning. He's going to flip Washington on its head, which he has done to an extent. You got to give Doge some credit, even though it's not as much money as they were wanting to save. Yeah, no, I don't disagree that there's definitely things that they could have done better instead of just coming in and hammering down everything. I think it's absolutely ludicrous. But point remains, he did attempt to do it. And to your point, MR, yes, the deep state is so deep that who can actually change it?
Or they're part of it.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? We will not know that answer. CK, anything else before we move on to BG's topic?
No, I had to get that off my chest, and I probably will bring it up in more podcasts down the road. I just want it to be fresh in people's minds. Hey, remember that thing you promised about the most horrific, vile shit that's ever happened in the history of the United States that the government was complicit in? We still don't know anything about it.
I would argue like slavery was, or the massacre of the Indians, the Trail of Tears. But yes, that was.
I think I said one of the most, right? One of the most.
Yeah, he meant one of the most.
Mount Rushmore.
It's on the Mount Rushmore of despicable things our country's been about. Also, by the way, guys, we're like pretty pro like America and the nation, and we love it. But it's okay to hold accountable. It's okay to call a spade, right? You can still love your nation and acknowledge its shortcomings.
Yep, that is loving your nation.
Yeah, what nation in this world doesn't have shortcomings? Yeah, right. Yeah. Name them, and I guarantee you there are shortcomings.
Yeah, put that in the comments section. But all right, BG, what do you have for us?
MRCK, thank you again for letting me take everyone's time. Happy 4th. Celebrate the independence of the United States from Great Britain. Go have another Boston Tea Party. Big economics events as of today / this week. Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, ironically, so for the last episode I said was signaling definitely a rate cut. A week later, or going into that weekend, Jay Powell at the conference in Portugal says, well, don't know definitively if I'd consider rate cuts or not in July. So at this point, the market's pricing in about a 25% chance of maybe being a rate cut in July. Most banks are forecasting it'll probably not happen until September at the earliest, if that's even what happens. I guess it remains to be seen behind the scenes because a lot of corporations are starting to finally change their payroll. So Microsoft today announced a 4% layoff of their workforce. I made their AI build out model, so they're cutting about 9,000 employees. And then in the private sector, something a little more concerning that hasn't been talked about, I haven't even seen it on Wall Street Journal. ADP reported the first drop in private sector payrolls in June of this year, June 2025. It's the first time that we've had a drop in private payrolls in 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that'll be significant for job losses, right? And that's one of the Fed's mandates is unemployment, maintaining unemployment rate. So I guess we'll see how they go about navigating unemployment versus the inflation.
Companies like Microsoft, which has an all-time high stock price, announcing that they're going to lay off, what was it, 4% of their staff, or 9,000 individuals.
Employees.
What does the government do with that? It's like, hey, you're making so much money, you can't be firing all these people. Granted, it's probably because AI is taking over those jobs.
How does unemployment not skyrocket in the next 3 years with AI?
Especially in all these tech sectors.
Anyone working on at a desk job is going to get replaced.
I would say any white collar position, and frankly some blue collar positions. Amazon announced this week that they officially have more robots than they have physical labor workers. So they're officially at more than 1 million total.
Guys,
robots.
are we just cooked, man? Using what the young kids say. Are we cooked?
No, I don't think
Andrew Yang for Prez. Right?
Yeah, bring back gang.
I think no, I mean there's a logical answer is some sort of universal basic income, and I hate that as like the libertarian, but if or like the government needs to own any AI companies or any companies that are automated.
We all know the government is horrific at running process and procedures.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, CK. I think we will do what we've always done. I mean, every time there's a new invention, right? The automobile replacing horses, right? Every single time that there's a massive economic shift, an underlying shift, people transition to those other sectors and places of work. So I think
until there isn't,
it works until it doesn't.
And it will.
It's like mutually assured destruction. It's a good policy until it isn't. Once it isn't, everyone's dead. Yeah,
we're so cooked.
We're going to transition. Our transition is going to be slaves to the
CK,
AI
I don't
lords.
No, I don't think this is not a Skynet Terminator
God, I hope you're right.
Environment yet, but just so we are aware that in economics we are seeing softening in the labor force. That's the bigger point.
Okay, so BG, I know I'm like hijacking your thing, but you are the economic expert between the two of us by far, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen on the internet and CNN and Fox all these reports coming out that Trump's tariffs are working, that it like made the United States X amount of hundreds of billions of dollars, that the policies worked, and some of the things I saw was like, hey, basically corporate America is slimming down its profit margins in order to make this happen, right? Could some argue that's the first time these corporations aren't getting out of the tax loopholes that make it so they pay no taxes, and this is almost a forcible way to hold them accountable to paying their fair share?
No.
Oh, well, shit. I don't know anything.
No, I would I would say to your point.
I thought I was pretty smart. I was like, I think that's pretty good.
To your point, MR, the corporations are realizing that if they fight the Trump administration in any capacity, whether it's through the currency side or the Office of Economic Bureau, whatever, and literally name any government entity, and Trump's in charge, they don't want to deal with the fallout. So the majority of corporations are what they're doing is using their bargaining power with suppliers and distributors to change their margins or just take a hit on their profits overall instead of parsing that to consumers. However, it's like I said last episode, at least I think I said last episode, companies like Amazon and Walmart are still choosing to parse their specific stuff to consumers. Their price increases to consumers from tariffs. But that's because they're major low-cost retailers. One of the only things that they can do in terms of market power is change the cost perspective. That's it. They're not one of these companies you go to for, high quality, right? I'm not going to Amazon, who's bringing in Temu, and Walmart, who's bringing in great value. Right. I'm not going to these companies to buy an Aston Martin.
Yeah, that's fair.
I found a Aston Martin on Temu for like $30, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure it fits in your pocket. Nice little toy car you got.
I wouldn't recommend purchasing any sort of quote unquote luxury good. I'm using air quotes for that. from either of those websites or
That's
companies
funny.
or
That's funny. All
retailers.
right, so I hijacked your segment. Do you have anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I think those are the big pieces. There was some more Iran news back and forth between what CK and I had talked about last time, and then I think that's really it. There's some Harvard stuff going around too, but the bill has not passed the House again, so we'll see if the
Oh
big
yeah, how do we
beautiful
not
bill
talk about the
doesn't
bill?
actually.
We're
Well,
all three
because
very
it's
against it, aren't we? Right? I am. I know
yeah,
CK is. You are too, right,
yes,
BG?
yes, definitely
Yeah.
against.
And I know some conservatives are a big fan. Some hate it. So this is the point I was making earlier. At least, at a bare minimum, the Conservative Party is at least split, and they don't all get in line on ideas, which I think is how you avoid getting labeled like a woke virus type thing. You know, when everyone just falls in line because that's what the party says, that's where you get like these coined terms. At least if the Conservative Party is divided, I want to say that's a good thing.
No, they
I
call them. They
wish.
don't call them woke mind virus. They call them maggots,
Oh,
right? That's what
actually, I honestly haven't heard that one. I've not seen it on the internet either.
I've seen it. Anyways, go ahead. There's a little bit of fall in line with Trump no matter what. I don't think it's as bad as the leftist, but there is definitely some people that are Trump no matter what. He can do no wrong.
Yeah, and they like post it up on their RVs and they get flags of him and they
Yeah.
run on their boats and all that. Yes, there are people that are hardliners and will do anything he says and think he's the second coming. He's not. That's literally like sacrilegious. But all right, I digress. All right, CK, what are your closing comments?
I don't know. I'm for once I'm at a loss for words. Take it away.
Dang. All right, I thought you were gonna say something about the big beautiful bill, just wrapping it up with a nice, neat
No
little
such
bow on,
thing
and
as
how your
big-
boy is fighting against it.
Thomas Massey, Prez 2028. Now I remember. And also, when we're talking about bills, there's no such thing as big and beautiful. That's an oxymoron. They're mutually exclusive. Mic drop.
Oh man, you are funny. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Daily Turnip. We appreciate you so much. I want to say we have a consistent 150 followers. That is no longer the case. Our last episode did not do well. I actually think we're getting shadow banned. When I try and look at like different accounts, like we don't pop up, and little hurt by that. So please do us a favor. Please share directly with your friends, family, people you care about, and want to try and get some unbiased news, or we at least make a feeble attempt at being unbiased. And also check out our Patreon page. But anyways, we all hope you have a phenomenal 4th of July weekend. You have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.